thing you guys saw yesterday about your amendment. Okay. There's a reporter who was.
Can you give us a sound check?
Sorry?
Sound check?
Yeah, sound check 1, 2, 3. Sound check 1, 2, 3. Hope you folks can hear me. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3.
How for you guys?
Sound check 1, 2, 3. Okay.
This is it. You have to report. You have to hand them right
We're missing Max. The one whose bill it is.
But Sarah, what I'm going to do is before it's over, for the team. You know what I mean? Copy.
It is definitely.
Yeah, my family was always the you are. Yeah, exactly.
There you go.
Hey man, good to see you.
Good to see you. All right, well, good.
Your runner shows right here. Last minute edition after Girl Monday.
Okay, cool. Let's do it.
Yeah, buddy. You stay there.
All right, well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Congressman Maxwell Alejandro Frost, proudly representing Florida's 10th Congressional District here in Congress, one of the premier tourist and travel destinations in the country and in the world. Today, we are here to introduce the Safe Air on Airplanes Act, legislation that comes at a time where folks pick up their phones and look at news to find that we still have a long way to go when it comes down to ensuring the safety and well-being of our flight crew and passengers. Every day, nearly 3 million people fly across the entire United States. But what a lot of folks don't know is that because of obsolete, flawed bleed air systems in almost all commercial aircraft, these passengers and flight crews are being exposed to dangerous engine fumes and toxic chemicals that are small enough to pass through current air filters, effectively forcing millions of people every day to inhale toxic air while traveling on an airplane. Being exposed to these fumes is not an insignificant thing. People and passengers and crew alike and pilots have been exposed to this, have suffered from chronic health illnesses, experienced dizziness, vomiting, difficulty breathing, irregular heart rates, and memory loss. How do we know? This legislation was inspired by my constituent, Shannon, who's here with us today. Awesome. Who's here with us today, who will be speaking here in a little bit. Shannon is a flight attendant who is currently on medical leave after experiencing a series of fume events where he inhaled contaminated toxic air while on the job. And actually, while I was flying up here just a few days ago, I met two flight attendants who recognized me, and after we took a photo, I told them about this press conference. And one of them had said that they had also just experienced a few different toxic fume events that put them out of work as well. And so right now the FAA is reporting fume events and exposures each and every day. The solution is clear, and we have it in this bill. The root cause of this issue is an aspect of commercial airplane design called bleed air system. Except for the new Boeing 787, jet aircrafts take or bleed air through the engine compressors and supply it to the cabin and flight deck. That's right, the air we're breathing on the aircraft are being filtered through the engine. The compressors are lubricated with oil and can also ingest external contaminants like hydraulic fluid, because planes without air bleeds already exist. Our bipartisan piece of legislation will end the use of this antiquated air system by phasing them out completely and requiring filters of these systems that are stronger and do a better job of keeping contaminants out of the air we breathe. The Safe Air on Airplanes Act is all about ensuring a future where pilots, cabin crew, flight attendants, passengers will not have to fear the air that they breathe. Without further ado, I'll go ahead and introduce Congressman Mike Lawler. Thank you.
Thank you, Congressman Frost, and appreciate your leadership on bringing this bill forward. Nothing is more important than the health and safety of our constituents. Ensuring that Americans have access to clean air and clean water is something that Republicans and Democrats agree on and have worked together to address for decades. Since coming to Congress, I've worked in a bipartisan way to protect Americans from dangerous chemicals. We've introduced legislation to mitigate PFAS contamination at our airports and prevent pollution in the Hudson River and our nation's waterways. And now our focus turns to air quality, specifically on our nation's airplanes. Every day, millions of airline passengers are at risk of dangerous fume exposure due to the flawed bleed air systems in almost all passenger aircraft. Exposure to these fumes can result in dizziness, vomiting, difficulty breathing, irregular heart rate, and memory loss. These effects can become chronic, lasting for a lifetime. Many pilots and flight attendants have left the industry due to these adverse health effects, at a time when pilot shortages remain a concern both domestically and globally. An average of 5 fume events are reported to the FAA every single day. It's unacceptable and must be addressed as quickly as possible to ensure the health and safety of all those who fly, from our pilots and our flight attendants to consumers. And that's why I'm proud to work with Congressman Frost and join him today in introducing the Safe Air on Airplanes Act. This common sense bipartisan legislation will phase out these obsolete bleed air systems in our nation's aircraft, going a long way to protecting the health and safety of the nearly 3 million daily airborne Americans. I'm looking forward to continuing to work with Congressman Frost and my colleagues in both parties to advance this important legislation. And now I will ask Congressman Garamendi to come up, to come up and say a few words.
Thank you very much. Like most everything, it's not done in one day. I want to thank the two gentlemen here for their introduction of the second phase of the cabin air safety legislation. The recent FAA bill that passed Congress and went to the President has the first step, and that's the monitoring systems. Legislation that has been worked on for the last 5 years in preparation for the current FAA. There's always more to be done, and you gentlemen are going right to the problem. We were unable in the legislation to actually get to the issue of the bleed air system. But this legislation that's introduced goes to the heart of the problem. The phasing out of the way in which the cabin air is brought, or air is brought into the cabin, has to change. We put monitoring devices will be in place. There'll be other efforts to provide for cabin safety. But we need this piece of legislation so that the problem will not any longer exist. The fumes that are generated in the engines will not be sucked into the cabin if the bleed air system is changed. So we've got work to do here. It's not going to be easy. The airline industry is not interested in spending money to protect the air quality and the passengers. And more important, the men and women that are on those planes every day as they carry out their jobs. And so for those who work on the plane, the legislation that was in the FAA reauthorization, an important step forward. Let's complete the job. Let's get this legislation passed. Gentlemen, thank you for introducing it. Maxwell, thank you so very much.
I'll also now bring up Congressman Robert Garcia.
Thank you. And first, of course, thank you to Congressman Frost for this important piece of legislation. It's also good to see that it's bipartisan. So, Congressman Lawler, thank you for your leadership on this. I'm very proud to support this legislation. Prior to coming to Congress, I was the mayor of Long Beach for 8 years. We have an airport there in Long Beach, and so we're constantly working with our airlines, our flight attendants, everyone involved in air and transportation. And you hear, of course, over and over again these stories, like you mentioned, Congressman, about flight attendants, about passengers having medical issues or reactions to the air quality in our aircraft. And so This legislation speaks directly to that issue, and I'm really proud to be an original supporter and co-sponsor of this legislation. And I want to thank not just the congressman, but also the stories and the flight attendants and folks in the industry that are actually stepping up and talking about their experiences with the air quality aboard our aircraft. People have a right to clean air, whether it's in their home, in their workplaces, in their neighborhoods, but also on their commercial flights that operate every single day in U.S. airspace. Everyone deserves also not only a safe place to travel on, but for many, a safe place to work. And we know that aircraft, that is a workplace for so many folks across this country, and that our airline crews deserve clean air. Huge corporations in the industry need to listen to our workers. They need to listen to the legislation and ensure that we have clean air for all of those that are traveling in our skies. I also want to thank our labor brothers and sisters that are here, that are in support, our advocates, and finally to all passengers that are experiencing or have experienced any adverse effects. This legislation is going to address that, and so we're very grateful to you both. So thank you.
Next up, we're going to bring up my sister with AFA CWA, Katira Johnson.
How's everyone doing today? Thank you, Representative Frost, Lawler, Mr. Robert Garcia, and Representative Garamendi for showing support on the Safe Air on Airplanes Act and working to stop fume events on passenger aircrafts. My name is Katira Johnson. I am proud to represent over 50,000 flight attendants at 20 airlines as the International Vice President for the Association of Flight Attendants, CWA. Our union has been leading this fight for over 30 years because cabin air quality and contaminated bleed air are serious health and safety issues for our members, for our colleagues in the cockpit, and for the passengers that we serve. The aircraft cabin must be pressurized. Just a little bit of background. I know they explained it, but I'm going to explain it in people terms. So the aircraft cabin must be pressurized because there's not enough oxygen above 25,000 feet. So external air is drawn in from the engines, compressed, warmed, and then pumped in to the pressurized aircraft cabin. This is called bleed air. Believe it or not, this bleed air is not filtered, and oil and fuel can leak and become vaporized. This vapor oil can enter the cabin air supply, causing a fume event. Cabin air bleed systems put everyone at risk. Still, there is no warming system for when cabin air is contaminated other than our own noses. Other than our own noses. Maybe I have a little bit of that. And the symptoms we experience from breathing contaminated air. The symptoms that flight attendants and passengers range from headaches, nausea, fatigue, fainting, neuromuscular damage, and memory loss. I did fly in this morning. Does any of this sound familiar? These are also things that we are considered as jet lag as well. Stakeholders know that this cabin bleed air system is an issue. The FAA Reauthorization Bill of 2024 includes requirements to study the issue. While the FAA reauthorization, and props to Congress for passing this important job bill, sets the pathway for record keeping, we cannot wait yet for another study to tell us what we already know and what we have been reporting. We know how to fix this issue, and now is the time for action. This is why we are supporting this bill. Aircraft manufacturers and airline operators have dismissed our data-driven concerns far too long, saying this issue needs further study and that the changes are too expensive. This bill makes common sense. It requires aircraft manufacturers to prioritize health and safety by designing planes that do not use bleed air, and gives airlines and manufacturers plenty of time to update designs and retrofit the fleet. I would like to recognize Representative Garamendi for his work on this issue as the lead sponsor of the Cabin Air Act of 2023, which directs the FAA to set air quality standards, establish trainings and reporting for flight attendants, pilots, and mechanics, and the installation of sensors to monitor air quality. Thank you. Congress, you wouldn't come to work if your office was full of toxins, so we are watching you and holding you accountable for taking real action to hold manufacturers and airlines accountable so that workers and passengers are not sickened by toxic air in the cabin of our planes, and as many of you know, as our offices. Aviation's first responders are the passengers we care for to deserve, breathe air and uncontaminated air. We look forward to working with members to craft and pass a final bill that puts our health and safety first. Protect trans folks, protect veterans, contract now, clean air now. Thank you.
And now, from the great state of Florida, I'm going to bring up Shannon DeWitt, who is a constituent of mine in Florida's 10th Congressional District.
Thank you.
First of all, I want to thank Congressman Frost for supporting this legislation. His office is absolutely phenomenal and supportive in District 10. And when I approached him about this, his staff looked into it further, and this got to where we're at now. And with the past information and efforts all combined to get to where we're at now. And I greatly appreciate you so much for everything you've done for me as one constituent, and cared enough to take the time to listen to me. And his staff did the research once again and realized the magnitude of this issue. And he is leading for the people, and what he's doing right now is for the people, and I'm thankful for that. Thank you. Let's give him a round of applause, because this is long. This needs to be taken care of, and he's doing it. All right. Though the significant direct focus of the Safe Air on Airplanes Act, which I fully support. I've lived through this, the health consequences. I've been a professional flight attendant for 18 years. And at first, these fume events, these toxic exposures did not impact me. But over time, I saw others impacted by it. And then I started having symptoms. And when I started having symptoms, I was in denial at first. And it just kept advancing. I have gone to the Cleveland Clinic Functional Medicine to recover, Mayo Clinic Cardiac, their division as well, to get help. I've also worked with Advent Care Internal Medicine in 8 months of speech language therapy when I lost the ability to speak properly after a fume event. I'm tired. I worked 18 years. I worked hard for my profession. I even lobbied with Stephen Shems on the Hill. What was that, 18 years ago when I was new? Because I cared about my profession. And this is wrong. This is wrong. And change needs to happen. Come on! Change needs to happen. We have had it. I'm tired of being poisoned. I just want to go to work and make my money and have my career. I should never, ever have to be worried about being poisoned in my workplace, period. Please support this bill. It means a lot to me, and it can save so many people from injury as well. It's time to focus on these bleed air situations, get a solution, move it on. We have the technology, we have the ability, no more excuses, pass this bill. That's all I have to say. Thank you. Got a little emotional. Sorry.
I appreciate you, man. Next up from TWU, we have Thom McDaniel.
Hello, everyone. My name is Thom McDaniel. I serve as an international vice president for the Transport Workers Union of America. We represent flight attendants and mechanics at 5 different airlines. I'm a 32-year flight attendant for Southwest Airlines in just a few days. And during those 32 years, the TWU has worked with other flight attendant groups for decades to bring attention to this important problem, toxic cabin air that's caused by bleed air. We've educated our members, we've created reporting procedures, developed exposure protocols, and funded the development of a blood test to confirm exposure. When bringing this to the airline management, we've been ignored and denied workman's compensation. They call these odor events as opposed to fume events to say so a workman's comp claim can say that we don't have protection for odors. So our flight attendants, as you can see, are suffering on a daily basis. Protocol whenever you report one of these events to our pilots is that the pilots immediately don an oxygen mask. Protocol for the flight attendants is to determine where the fumes are, or the smell is coming from, which literally makes us canaries in a coal mine. We will continue in these efforts, but the only way to truly combat this problem is where it starts, and that is creating safe aircraft engines that will not create the bleed air on the aircraft. This is an issue that our members care deeply about. for their health and safety and for the health and safety of our customers and our passengers. The TW is grateful to the Congress and President Biden for signing the new FAA Reauthorization Act of 2024, which includes language from Congressman John Garamendi's Cabin Air Safety Act that requires the FAA to create a standardized reporting system for smoke and fume events on board commercial aircraft so that the voices and experiences of flight attendants, mechanics, and pilots are heard. While this is a great step in the right direction, more must be done. That's why the TWU is proud to endorse the phasing out of bleed air systems that provide the air that our crew and passengers inhale or otherwise come in contact with. As air travel continues to reach all-time highs, it's crucial that we take every effort to keep flying safe for everyone involved. We applaud Congressman Frost, Congressman Garamendi, and Congressman Lawler for hearing these concerns and taking decisive legislative action, and we encourage all of our congressmen and senators to sign on to this bill. Thank you.
And next up, last but certainly not least, we have Shane White from Teamsters.
All right. Thank you, brother. Thank you. Well, I don't know about you, but I could use a little bit of that fresh, cool cabin air right now. Goodness gracious, it's hot out here. Thank you all for being here today. My name is Shane White, and I represent the International Brotherhood of Teamsters. I'm a captain with Atlas Air and a proud member of Local 2750. First, I extend my heartfelt gratitude to Representative Frost and Representative Lawler and Representative Garamendi for this. This is a great issue that we're talking about today. Appreciate you championing this. I'm honored to express the Teamsters' full support behind this legislation as it aims to protect not only the flight attendants and the cabin crew, but also the general public from these toxic fumes. What this ultimately seems to culminate from is what we need to do is remove the bleed air system that functions as a pressurization system and a ventilation system for these aircraft. As you've heard today, and I won't take too much time about it, but the bleed air can become contaminated with engine oil, hydraulic oil, and other harsh chemicals that pass through these air filters and can contaminate and infiltrate the cabin air. Especially those of us that are used to talk, that've seen talk today, this is our workplace that we show up every day to and try to do the best job that we can. And we don't deserve to be working in a toxic environment. Now, this bleed air system that we talk about has been the standard for decades, and it's time to get rid of it. We've realized just recently the compromise to safety and health that it has when it's introduced to the cabin air and the ventilation and pressurization systems. I personally have had an experience with this. It was about 12 years ago. We were flying in, my first officer and I, and you have to understand that these fumes that they were talking about do not smell like fire. It's not an electrical fire. It's not a cause for concern. It's just a foul odor in the air that you don't even pay much attention to because it's nothing we're ever trained to deal with. But we were coming into landing. We're about 7 to 8 minutes from touchdown, and we got this smell of a wet, moldy sock. It's overpowering in the flight deck. No cause for concern. We continued on. We got the aircraft safely on the ground and to the gate. As we were walking out of the flight deck, I looked over at my first officer, and his eyes were completely bloodshot and watering. And then he looked at me, and the same thing. We didn't think anything about it. It was kind of embarrassing to have to walk through the terminal with bloodshot eyes that looked like radishes. But we made our way out. I got to the car, and I got in my car, and it was probably about 30 minutes after this had happened. And I just got a stomach ache. I got nauseous. This was 12 years ago. I had no idea what was going on. Just thought I was coming down with something, almost to the point where I had to call my wife to come pick me up and drive me home. So this is a very important bill to me. The Teamsters, we represent thousands of flight attendants, thousands of pilots, and we are daily exposed to these chemicals, and we're tired of it. We would like to thank Congressman Garamendi for your work on the FAA reauthorization bill, but there's more work to be done. And that is what we're talking about today, is the Safe Air on Airplanes Act. This is the continuation that needs to happen. It's a bipartisan bill, very common sense, and it aims to protect flight crew and passengers from these harmful effects. And it goes across aircraft models, it goes across aircraft carriers, and it goes across passenger and cargo. It covers everything to make this a safer environment. And I'm proud to stand with my brothers and sisters in aviation labor today and fully support this bill. And we'd like to thank Representative Frost, Representatives Lawler, Garcia, and Garamendi on these efforts, and we look forward to working with you all in these coming days and years to eliminate this bleed air system as it continues to affect our health, as it pressurizes and ventilates the cabin. We'd like to usher in a new era of safe, clean air travel. We want to be the global leaders in the United States in this initiative. And at the end of the day, when we think about it, the air, it belongs to all of us. The skies belong to all of us, and it's our duty to make them safe for everyone that uses those airways. So thank you. Thank you again. Appreciate it. Thank you so much for coming out and doing this. This means a lot to me. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, look, you just heard it from our aviation workforce, from members of Congress who have been working on this issue, leading on this issue. And again, I want to thank Congressman Garamendi for his leadership on this issue. And together, in a bipartisan way, we're going to push this forward. And this is a very practical this is a very practical piece of legislation. We're not saying this needs to happen tomorrow. We've set out what we believe is a very fair timeline for the manufacturers for us to do this switch to ensure the safety of all of our passengers and of our flight crew. So thank you all so much for being here. Do we have time for questions? We have time for one question because we're voting. Any questions? Yes.
Hey, Congressman, what's your engagement been like with airlines, aircraft manufacturers about making these changes?
Well, you know, I think it's no secret that not big fans of being pushed to make this change. But I think what we really have to listen to is we have to listen to the people who are in the aircraft every single day. And that's why we're standing here with labor and with labor leaders who understand what this does to the workforce, but also to our passengers. And, when I was on the floor talking with folks about this, a lot of people didn't know it was an issue, but knew about the issue in the back of their head because we're members of Congress and we're always on planes too. And so my hope is that, again, this is a bipartisan bill. My hope is we can move this forward for the good of the American people, especially as air travel becomes more and more of a fact of life for a lot of different professions, and we want to make sure that people are safe. So, again, thank you all so much for being here. Oh, yeah, let me.
Sure. Your question really goes to the current FAA legislation that has passed Congress. The cabin air safety part of that bill was a 5-year process. Included in that process was how to develop a better way to get air into the cabin that was safe. The airline industry and the manufacturers fought every step along the way. Ultimately, we did make progress. And in the legislation, there is the monitoring program which was discussed a few moments ago. That's the best we could do at this time after 5 years of effort. The good news is Maxwell and Lawler are picking up the ball. We got it to the 50-yard line. Now we got to get it to the end zone. And that's what this is. The path has been laid out. We know what needs to be done, and it can be done. It's going to take time to modify new aircraft that comes in, and it's going to take time, even more time, to change the systems on the existing aircraft. An intermediate step that we tried to get into the legislation, but we're unsuccessful about it, is to put in place air quality monitoring systems that would be monitoring the air on an ongoing basis, moment by moment, while that airplane was in the sky. We were unable to get that in because of the opposition of the airline industry and the manufacturers. But the problem is real. The problem is very, very real for passengers and even more so for the cabin crews. So we're going to continue on with this. The good news is we have new, energetic legislators pushing it through. So thank you so very, very much.
Thank you so much for being here.